Welcome, students. Let's resume our reading on page 223 of 7 Myths About Taxing the Rich. Myth 6. The 2001-2003 tax cuts did not generate strong economic growth. Truth. The tax cuts generated strong economic growth. The 2001 and 2003 tax cuts generated strong economic growth. The 2003 cuts, however, were more effective at creating economic growth because Congress designed them expressly for that purpose. They worked better because they increased the incentives to generate new income by accelerating the phase-in of the 2001 reduction in marginal income tax rates and by reducing rates on capital gains and dividends, lowering the cost of capital, which is critical for economic recovery and growth. Lower income tax rates generally promote growth, but since the 2001 cuts were phased in over several years, they did not kick in quickly enough to change the behavior of workers, businesses, and investors to help boost the ailing economy, so growth remained sluggish. The 2001 cuts also increased the child tax credit from $500 to $1,000 a child. Although a large tax cut from a revenue perspective, the increase in the child tax credit did nothing to increase growth-promoting incentives. Recognizing that the slow phase-in of rate reductions was not generating economic growth, Congress accelerated the rate reductions to increase the incentives to work, save, and invest during the 2003 cuts. The 2003 tax cuts also lowered rates on capital gains and dividends, generating strong growth by decreasing the cost of capital, which caused investment to increase. More investment meant that more money was available for startup capital for new businesses and for existing businesses to expand operations and add new jobs. The rate cuts on capital gains and dividends also unlocked capital trapped in investments that paid lower returns than otherwise would have been earned if the tax did not exist. This generated economic growth by allowing capital to flow freely to its most efficient use. The increased incentives to save, invest, coupled with an acceleration of the cuts on marginal income tax rates, were a major reason economic growth picked up steam almost immediately after the 2003 tax cuts. The passage of the 2003 tax cut started a different story. In the first quarter of that year, real GDP grew at a pedestrian 1.2%. In the second quarter, during which the 2003 cuts were signed into law, economic growth jumped to 3.5%, the fastest growth since the previous decade. In the third quarter, the rate of growth jumped again to an astounding 7.5%. Unfortunately, President Obama and Congress plan to increase the income tax rates and taxes on capital gains and dividends. This would reverse the beneficial effect of the 2001 and 2003 cuts and further slow economic growth during this severe recession. Myth 7. Raising the top two income tax rates will not negatively impact small businesses because only 2% of them pay rates at that level. Truth, raising the top two income tax rates will negatively impact almost 3/4 of all economic activity created by small businesses. Small businesses are a vital component of the economy. They create jobs for millions of Americans and are a major factor driving economic growth. Evaluating tax policy on the number of small businesses that pay the top two rates is not the proper way to determine the impact of raising these rates. What is important is how much small business income is subject to the top two rates. This measures the extent to which the top two rates affect the economic activity that small businesses create. Using this more accurate metric, it is clear that the top two rates have an enormous impact on small businesses. According to the Treasury Department, 72% of small businesses' income is subject to those rates. The amount of small business income subject to the top two rates is high in relation to the number of businesses that pay the rates because these businesses are the most successful. As a result, they employ the most people and generate the most economic activity. Raising rates on these successful businesses would damage the economy at any time, but doing so now will only cost more people their jobs. Highly successful small businesses faced with higher tax rates will cut back on plans to expand, hire fewer workers, and lower wages for current workers at a time when the economy desperately needs them to expand and create more jobs. Higher rates also discourage would-be entrepreneurs from entering the market. This will negatively affect long-term economic growth because businesses that otherwise would have been created and added jobs to the economy will never get off the starting blocks. Conclusion. The many arguments used by proponents of higher taxes ignore basic economic facts and distort the positive benefits of the 2001 and 2003 tax cuts. The truth is that the 2001 and 2003 tax cuts were a major factor behind robust economic growth between 2003 and 2007. Undoing those tax cuts now for any taxpayer would inflict unnecessary damage to a struggling economy and needlessly cost many more Americans their jobs. Adding additional higher surtaxes on high earners to fund a government takeover of the health care system would only do more damage to the economy and lead to more lost jobs and lower economic growth. Instead of imposing these economy-injuring tax hikes, Congress should close budget deficits and spur economic growth by immediately cutting spending, including reforming Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid entitlement programs in order to get long-term budget deficits under control, making the 2001-2003 tax cuts permanent for all taxpayers, and further cutting tax rates on workers and investors. Raising taxes on the rich will hurt the economy at a time when the U.S. can least afford further damage. That's the end, and you guys can get to work on your paper.